Life as a medieval archer wasn't just tough, it was a relentless, bone-crushing grind that broke bodies, minds, and spirits. Forget romantic images of noble warriors firing elegant shots from a distance. Being an archer in the Middle Ages was a brutal, thankless job that demanded everything and gave back nothing but scars and stories. The real question isn't just whether it was hard, it's whether you could survive it. Picture this, a life where your childhood is stolen, your body is warped, and your survival depends on a stick and string against armies of armored knights. Let's dive into the raw, unfiltered truth of what it meant to be a medieval archer, and trust me, by the end, you'll be commenting whether you think you could handle it. A childhood stolen by the bow. Imagine being 7 years old, barely tall enough to reach your father's waist, and handed a bow as tall as you are. In medieval England, archery wasn't a hobby, it was the law. Kings like Edward III didn't ask nicely. Every male from 7 to 60 had to practice archery every Sunday after church. Skip it? You'd face fines, public humiliation in the stocks, or worse. Your tiny hands, still soft from youth, would blister and bleed as you pulled a bowstring hundreds of times. Again, your elders would bark, ignoring your tears. Pain wasn't an excuse, it was the point. By 10, you're not playing with other kids. While they're chasing each other or sneaking apples, you're lifting stones, pulling weights, and repeating the same soul-crushing motion until your shoulders scream. By 13, you're expected to draw a longbow with a force of 90 to 120 pounds. Imagine hoisting a grown man off the ground with just 3 fingers. Your body doesn't just grow, it changes. Skeletons of medieval archers tell a haunting story, left arms 50% thicker than the right, spines twisted like old trees, bone spurs jutting from fingers worn raw by bowstrings. These weren't men, they were machines forged by pain. And the stakes? If you couldn't shoot, you were worthless. In a world where war was constant, a weak archer was a dead archer. Could you endure a childhood where every day was a test of survival, where your worth was measured by calluses and scars? Drop a comment, what's the hardest physical challenge you've ever faced, and could it compare to this? The longbow, your lover, your tormentor. The English longbow was a masterpiece of medieval engineering and a relentless source of agony. Standing 6 feet tall, crafted from yew, it was light at 3 to 5 pounds but demanded monstrous strength. Draw weights ranged from 90 to 180 pounds, try lifting a pit bull with your fingertips, then do it 500 times in a day. Modern Olympic archers use bows with a fraction of that force. Medieval archers? They laughed at easy. Drawing the bow was only half the battle. Maintaining it was a full-time job. Hemp or flax bowstrings stretched in rain, so you carried spares wrapped in waxed cloth or tucked under your helmet. A wet string was a death sentence. The bow itself could warp if stored wrong, and even the best ones snapped under the strain of battle. Arrows? You needed dozens, each perfectly matched to your bow's power. Too light, they'd flutter uselessly. Too heavy, they'd never reach the enemy. Crafting arrows was an art, fletching feathers, shaping shafts, forging arrowheads, all while praying they'd fly true. The physical toll was apocalyptic. Archer skeletons show compressed spines, arthritis so severe they could barely move, and bone spurs so large they locked joints in place. One archer's grave revealed a hand so deformed it looked like it belonged to a monster. Yet they kept shooting. Why? Because the longbow was their life. One archer called it "my cruel wife," always demanding, never forgiving. If you could talk to your gear, what would it say about you? Comment below, let's hear it. The weight of war, gear that broke you. Medieval archers didn't travel light. When war called, you carried your life on your back, and it weighed as much as a small cow. The longbow was just the start. You needed 60 to 100 arrows, weighing 7 to 12 pounds, slung at your hip, stuffed in your boots, or stabbed into the ground like a deadly garden. Run out of arrows? You might as well run out of air. Smart archers carried fletching kits, feathers, glue, thread, to craft more mid-battle. Imagine DIY under enemy fire. Armor was a cruel joke. Most archers wore quilted gambesons, think fighting in a 15-pound mattress. The lucky got chainmail, adding 20 pounds. Helmets? Another 5. Then came weapons, a dagger for stabbing, a maul for smashing, or an axe for hacking. Add food, water, cloaks, fire starters, and spare boots, and you're hauling 60 to 80 pounds across medieval hellscapes. One archer quipped, "I'm half man, half mule, and the mule's the better half." Carrying this load wasn't just physical, it was mental. Every step reminded you of the battle ahead. Every creak of your gear whispered death. Could you carry your body weight for miles, knowing you're marching to a fight you might not survive? Share your toughest hike or workout in the comments. How does it stack up? The march, a war before the war. Before you even saw an enemy, the march to battle could kill you. Picture waking before dawn, no coffee, just stale bread and cold water, if you were lucky. Fires were often banned in enemy territory, so breakfast was as miserable as your mood. Then you'd march 20th to 30th miles a day, carrying 80 pounds of gear, in boots so thin they might as well be socks. Medieval roads were mud pits, rocky trails, or fields that ate ankles for lunch. Maps? Barely existed. Guides? Sometimes they led you straight into ambushes. Weather was your enemy. Summer roasted you in your gambeson. Winter froze your fingers to your bow. Rain turned gear into soggy weights and made bowstrings useless. One chronicler wrote, "English archers march like demons, their feet so hard even stones beg for mercy." Hardened feet came from brutal prep, walking barefoot on gravel or soaking soles in salt and vinegar. Boots wore out fast, and replacements were often scavenged from corpses. Sleep? You curled up on the ground, bugs feasting on your face, praying your cloak kept you dry. Food was a nightmare. Hard bread broke teeth and less soaked. Dried meat was tougher than your boots. Foraging meant stealing from villages, which made you as welcome as the plague. By the time you reached battle, you were starved, soaked, and half dead, but your enemies would soon wish you were deader. What's the longest you've gone without a proper meal or sleep? Comment below, could you survive the march? Battle, precision in chaos. When battle finally came, archers weren't just soldiers, they were medieval snipers, turning battlefields into slaughterhouses. Formations were meticulous, shoulder to shoulder in curved lines, positioned to exploit terrain, wind, and sunlight. A hill gave extra range. A forest blocked enemy cavalry. Sun in the enemy's eyes? Perfect. Arrows didn't just fly, they rained. A skilled archer fired 10 to 12 arrows a minute. 100 archers launched 1,000, and at Agincourt, 6,000 archers unleashed 60,000 arrows a minute. That's not warfare, that's a storm. Arrows hit at 160 feet per second, punching through for inches of oak. Chainmail was useless. Even plate armor had gaps for arrows to find. Against infantry, volleys forced enemies to charge into a meat grinder. Against cavalry, archers planted stakes to stop horses, then aimed for riders and mounts alike. Communication was key, flags, horns, and drums signaled when to shoot, adjust, or retreat. Crosswinds? Shift formation. Rain? Aim higher. Narrow field? Stack the enemy like firewood. But it wasn't all glory. Friendly fire was common. One misaimed volley could kill your own men, and when arrows ran out, the real terror began. What's the most intense situation you've faced where precision mattered? Drop it in the comments, let's compare. Melee, from sniper to prey. When the enemy closed in, your bow became a stick, and you became a target. Archers carried 60 to 100 arrows, gone in 15 minutes of heavy fighting. No resupply, no retreat, just a dagger, maul, or axe against knights in 60-pound armor wielding swords forged by masters. Your gambeson? Might as well be paper. Some archers used their bows as staffs, others swung them like clubs, but it was like fighting a tank with a toothpick. Knights trained for melee from childhood. You? You trained to shoot. One writer called it a sparrow against a lion. Yet archers fought. Some tripped knights with their bows. Others hooked shields with axes. A few survived by sheer luck, stealing enemy weapons to fight on. But most faced a brutal truth: once the arrows were gone, you were meat. Imagine going from elite marksman to desperate brawler in minutes. Could you make the switch? Comment your survival strategy. Medicine: surviving the cure. If you survived battle, medieval medicine might finish you off. Arrow wounds were common, even from friendly fire. A clean arrow through the body was lucky; it could be cleaned from both sides. Embedded arrows? Surgeons used tools like the crow's beak, with a 50% success rate. The other 50%? Dead. Melee wounds were worse. Clean cuts might heal, but crushed limbs or ragged slashes meant gangrene. Amputation was your best bet, but most didn't survive it. Treatment was barbaric. Wine was poured into wounds, not bad, since alcohol killed bacteria. Stitches used boar bristles or horsehair, often unsterilized. Cauterization with hot iron stopped bleeding but caused infected burns. Field hospitals were straw mats soaked in blood and pus, where infections spread like gossip. Pain relief? Bite a strap or pray. Surgeons blamed bad air for infections, treating them with honey, decent, or animal dung, disastrous. Many archers never shot again. Hand injuries made drawing a bow impossible. Some cut off their own fingers to avoid being redrafted. Could you endure surgery with no anesthesia? Share your toughest medical experience in the comments. Money: risking everything for pennies. You'd think saving kingdoms paid well. Wrong. An archer earned 6 pence a day during campaigns, double a laborious wage but barely enough for a meal and ale. Payments were erratic, sometimes delayed months. Unpaid archers turned to looting, stripping armor, weapons, or boots from the dead. A knight's armor could be worth 6 months' pay, but competition was fierce. Between campaigns, you got nothing. Many worked as laborers, carpenters, or archery instructors, but jobs were scarce. Injuries? No compensation beyond a few shillings. Medical bills drained what little you saved. Retirement? A pipe dream. Most archers died poor, buried in paupers' graves. Their hands defended empires, but their wallets begged for scraps. What's the worst job you've had for terrible pay? Comment below, let's hear your struggle. Society: heroes in war, nobodies in peace. Archers were vital but never belonged. In war, they were feared. In peace, they were just commoners. Nobles called them crude, yet relied on their skill. One French lord griped, "Archery lets peasants kill their betters from afar." Commoners distrusted them. Veterans brought back battlefield habits like looting or violence. The church condemned bows as unchristian, leaving archers caught between royal praise and priestly scorn. Women saw archers as risky bets, decent pay but likely to die or disappear. Towns with many archers had high widow rates. Kids idolized them but dreaded being chosen for training. Archers lived in limbo, heroes when needed, forgotten when not. Where do you feel you don't quite fit in? Share your story in the comments. The mental toll: a mind under siege. Physical pain was only half the battle. Medieval archers carried a mental burden that could crush even the strongest. From childhood, you were taught one thing: your bow is your life, and failure means death. Every missed shot in practice earned you a beating or public shaming. By the time you reached a battlefield, the pressure was suffocating. A single poorly aimed arrow could kill an ally or miss a knight, costing your side the fight. Imagine thousands of eyes, your commander, your comrades, your king, judging your every move while enemy cavalry charges. In battle, the screams of the wounded, the sight of friends turned to pincushions, and the stench of blood and mud haunted you. Archers weren't distant spectators, they saw the carnage their arrows caused up close. Some coped by hardening their hearts, others by drinking until they forgot. One archer's journal described nights spent staring at the stars, whispering prayers to erase the faces of men he'd killed. No one talked about trauma back then, but the shaking hands and sleepless nights told the story. Between campaigns, the mental strain didn't lift. Returning to a village that saw you as a killer or a drifter meant isolation. You trained to be a weapon, not a neighbor. Some archers turn to alehouses, others to reckless brawls, just to feel something other than dread. Could you carry the weight of 1,000 deaths on your conscience while the world calls you a hero? Comment below, what's the heaviest mental burden you've faced? Training beyond the bow, a life of discipline. Archery was the core, but medieval archers were molded into survivalists. Training went far beyond pulling a bowstring. You learned to read wind and terrain, judging how a gust or hill could shift an arrow's path. You studied enemy armor, memorizing weak points, gaps at the neck, joints, or visor slits. This wasn't just skill, it was obsession. One mistake, and your arrow bounced harmlessly off a knight's plate. Survival training was brutal. Archers practiced building shelters from branches and cloaks, starting fires in rain, and finding food in barren lands. You learned to track enemies by broken twigs or hoofprints, skills that saved lives during ambushes. Physical conditioning was relentless, running miles in full gear, wrestling to build strength, even swimming in icy rivers to toughen your body. One trainer's motto was grim: if you're not suffering, you're not learning. Discipline was everything. Archers followed strict codes: no drinking before battle, no abandoning formation, no looting until ordered. Break the rules, and you'd face lashes or worse. This life of rigor turned boys into machines, but at what cost? Could you live under such unrelenting discipline, where every moment is a test? Share your experience with strict training or rules in the comments. The enemy's view, living as a target. Ever wonder what it was like to face a medieval archer? To the enemy, you weren't a man, you were a demon. French knights at Crécy and Agincourt described the terror of advancing under a sky black with arrows, each one screaming toward them at 160 feet per second. An arrow could pierce a horse's flank, topple a rider, or find a gap in armor, ending a noble's life in seconds. One knight wrote, "The English archers don't fight, they slaughter." Enemies hated archers with a passion. If captured, archers faced gruesome fates, flaying, burning, or having their drawing fingers hacked off as a message. This made archers fight harder, knowing surrender wasn't an option. The psychological edge was real. Enemies hesitated, broke ranks, or charged recklessly, all because of the fear you inspired. But that fear came at a price. Every arrow you fired painted a target on your back. Could you live knowing you're the most hated man on the battlefield? Comment your thoughts. What would it feel like to be so feared? The legacy: forgotten heroes. Medieval archers changed warfare forever, turning battles like Agincourt into legends. Their longbows made knights obsolete, proving a peasant with a bow could topple a noble. Yet their legacy is bittersweet. No statues honor archers. No songs immortalize their names. They were the backbone of armies, but history celebrates the knights and kings. Village records list archers as John the Bowman or William Archer, their lives reduced to a job title. Some archers passed their skills to their sons, creating families of bowmen who supplied armies for generations. Others taught village boys, hoping to spare them the pain of learning the hard way. Their techniques, draw, aim, release, echo in modern archery, but the men behind them are ghosts. Knowing your life's work would be forgotten, could you still pour your soul into it? Comment below, what legacy would you want to leave? Could you do it? So, could you be a medieval archer? Could you survive a childhood of pain, a body warped by a bow, marches that broke mules, battles that turned snipers into prey, medicine that killed as often as it saved, and a society that used you then tossed you aside? It took grit, skill, and a stubborn will to live. Most of us wouldn't last a week. Comment below with anything you think you could handle: the march, the bow, the battle, and anything you absolutely couldn't. Be honest. And if you want more brutal history like this, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. We're diving into the darkest corners of the past every week. Let's get those comments rolling. What's your verdict?